Hello. Regardless of how life came about on Earth, here on Emigin, it started from self-replicating proteins in a hydrothermal vent. And viruses exist, having began as self-replicating proteins that adapted to get resources from other self-replicating proteins. And going back to said self-replicating proteins, they in response developed a cell membrane for defense, and inside that, they also have ribosomes and cytoplasm. I'll call this kingdom Unispels, or one skin. Correction, it's pronounced Unuspelis. But anyway, since their cell membrane does pretty much nothing but control what chemicals can and cannot enter the organism for more protection, they may evolve a proper cell wall, and for that, I'll call these organisms duplicicute, or double skin. And also, a cell capsule is an external organelle which goes on top of the cell wall that is used to manipulate their environment, similar to the arms of centauristic tetrapods. You know, the tentacles and spikes on the surface of some bacteria, that's the cell capsule. So anyway, a clade of duplicicute may develop a cell capsule. I'll call this clade triplexcutis, or triple skin. Another group are the Autonians, which have specialized organelles that can metabolize non-carbon, inorganic chemicals, though most can resort to heterotrophy if necessary. Most clades aren't very diverse due to a lack of inorganic compounds in most areas, with two exceptions. One of the most advanced clades of Autonians that break down rocks, which I call Liphonians, and these have colonial forms as well, as some of the most basal Autonians, so basal that they actually metabolize an organic compound, CO2, using sunlight, their phototrophs, thus warranting the name Photonians. Both bacterial forms and colonial/multicellular forms have a vascule for storing sugar to survive the night. And the cyanophytes, which belong to this clade, are notable for being, at first glance, the only autotrophs on land, although when you look into it, you realize that Villae plantae, and thus the terrestrial form's root systems, are actually symbiotic multicellular Liphonians. Also, when I referenced there being terrestrial cyanophytes, I was talking about the present day. They are solely aquatic as of the time I'm currently talking about at this point in the series. And on the other side of the slime mold of life, there are some heterotrophs very similar to duplicicute. At one point, two of the same species both had holes torn in their side, and as they were closing their respective holes, they got pushed together by two larger Autonians trying to mate, and this connected their holes, causing them to fuse into one cell. Also, I will note that, sad to say, the Autonians did not get their fun. But, as I was saying, they became one cell, though with two nucleoids, and they then developed an organelle that connects them, and having two nucleoids makes them less vulnerable to viruses, since if one is taken out, they can rely on the other nucleoid and eventually replace the lost one. Doing this does require they break the organelle that connects them whenever the cell membrane is violated unexpectedly. And they also have a internal membrane to quarantine the other side of the cell from the one being attacked, as well as allowing it to survive while it rebuilds, and they also have a proper nucleus to further protect them from viral infection. I'll call these forms duplex cerebrum, or double brain. Among these forms are the Placozoins. In the case of the radial zoomorphs, the cells in their tissues compose of 7 segments in a honeycomb shape to leave few gaps in the tissue, and there are no cell walls in the muscle tissues, so they can more easily contract. However, they have more traditional duplex cerebrum cells in some places, for instance their blood, and notably, there is a clade of single-cell duplex cerebrum that pull their cell membrane along surfaces to move and thus lack a cell wall. And macrobacteria lack proper tissues and move around using tails on the individual cells on the side of the organism, and similarly, many single-celled heterotrophs, so they can move around, also have a tail or flagellum, that's the technical term for it, to find food like Triplex cutis. And the first Autonians also did, though no living forms do, but it is something also found in a group of heterotrophs related to the Autonians, which have an organelle that serves as a frugut going through the side, no symmetry, and they also have organelles at the front of the digestive tract that function similar to the cell capsules of Triplex cutis. But only in one spot, and on another spot on the side in most forms. These evolved from a flagellum at the end of the cell used to move around. I'll call these forms brachium cellula, or arm cells. And this kept being changed to love your arm when I moved it back and forth between English and Latin in Google Translate. So take this with a grain of salt, lol. But anyway, them and Triplex cutis are the dominant bacteria on planet Emigin. And finally, I don't really like taxonomic rankings besides kingdom, phylum, and species, because they're just useless labels that, and admittedly the three I approve of, are also das to an extent, but at least they have clearly defined and consistent definitions that make them worth denoting, since our dumb ape brains need social constructs to understand the world. But if I had to break these into domains, I'd have the Autonians, Duplicicerebrum, the basal cells, as well as precellular and viruses. And yes, I just defeated my own point. So yeah, it's the end of the video, the end of a very long break between videos. But yeah, it's now the end of the video. You may notice that you can't see me relaxing in my little sitting room, drinking my tea at the end of this video, but instead some cladograms. These are the cladograms of the various organisms on planet Emigin. It's a special episode ending, I guess, on some level. But yeah, anyway. So this episode took... First there was a break, and then this episode took quite a while to come out, and yeah, this is the longest I've ever gone between two episodes, and yeah, I do feel a bit unsatisfied with how this episode came out. Some of the audio in it's pretty bad, like pretty darn bad. Some of the ideas in it, maybe were a bit not fleshed out well enough, I feel, and even a bit of the art assets, I feel like I'd have done them differently if I had to I'd do them differently if I had to redo them. So it's not the video, like, it's very rushed. It's not the best video I've ever made, as well as, also, I don't remember if I said this in update video number 2, but I'm going to reiterate it. This fact being that protozoa, his new name, the new name for protozoa is, it's radial zoomorpha. You can probably see it on the Tree of Life here, but regardless. Oh, and by the way, this is the last video of part 2. I don't know how to pull sound effects, lol. But yeah, so we're finally moving on to part 3. And after that, I finally feel like I'm starting to get this series off the ground.